Welcome to Ministry in Motion, where we explore best practices for your ministry in the 21st century. I'm Derek Morris.
And I'm Anthony Kent, and we're delighted to welcome you to this program. Derek, this is a bit of a tough one, and one that we wish that we didn't need to address.
It is. We're talking about domestic abuse, which could include spousal abuse, child abuse, elder abuse. It seems like a pandemic problem in our culture and maybe even inside our own families. So it's a challenging one, but we've got some good guests.
That's good. Tell us about the guests, Derek.
Well, Claudio and Pamela Consuegra, who've been guests before on Ministry in Motion, want to share with us not only about the problem, not only about the cycle of abuse, but what we can do to break that cycle, what we can do as leaders in our communities to make a difference.
This really does sound like a very significant one for pastors, elders, congregational leaders that may have to deal with this.
Yes, and we're glad that you joined us for this important topic, domestic abuse. You say, that doesn't sound very positive, but I think if you stay with us and listen to our guests, you'll learn some insights that can bless your life and bless the lives of people in your community. That's our topic for Ministry in Motion today. We hope you'll stay tuned. Welcome back to Ministry in Motion. Our topic today, domestic abuse. It's a challenging topic, but I'm so grateful we've got some excellent guests with us. Claudio and Pamela Consuegra, welcome back to Ministry in Motion.
Thank you.
You've been guests before. We've appreciated the insights that you've shared about the family. And your background, you're Family Ministries Director, Claudio, for the North American Division of Seventh-day Adventists. And you're Associate Director, Pamela. So you work together in ministry.
Yes, we do.
And I wish we could say that all families are little heavens on earth, but what's the reality? What does it look like out there as you interact with leaders and talk about the families in their communities?
Sad to say, domestic abuse happens outside of the church and inside of the church. A part of my experience has been a little maybe different than other pastors. I've been a police chaplain also for 25 years. So I've seen a lot of domestic violence while riding with police officers. But even in the church, I recall not too long ago while I was a ministerial director that I got a call from a member of a church saying, my husband's been beating me up for as long as we've been married. And I recall asking, well, did you talk to your pastor about that? And her response was, well, he said, yes, we need to pray because he is an elder of the church. As if to say, we need to excuse him, ignore it, work with him, as opposed to working with the victim. So it is the reality outside of the church as well as inside of the church.
Now, when we talk about domestic abuse, Pamela, are we talking about a lot of different subcategories there?
Well,
spouse, children, elder abuse, what's included under the umbrella of domestic abuse?
for many people, when you say domestic abuse or domestic violence, they get a picture in their mind. And that picture they get is a picture of the husband abusing the wife. But we want to set the record straight that that's not always the reality. In fact, statistics indicate that there really is an equal number that works the opposite way. There's an equal number of women actually abusing men. The problem is it's not reported.
It's underreported.
It's underreported.
Yeah, men don't necessarily want to call the police or tell somebody, my wife is beating me up. So it goes underreported, but apparently the levels are about the same. And when it comes to domestic abuse, that includes physical abuse, that includes sexual abuse, it includes verbal abuse. And there's a sort of a subcategory that some people have chosen to call religious abuse. That is to use religion as a weapon to abuse the person. The husband that says, you have to do this with me or to me because the Bible says, or because the sacred book here says that.
Using the scripture as a weapon of some kind.
Exactly, to oppress, to control, to hurt the other person.
Now, your ministry's primarily been in North America, is that right?
That's right.
What is the situation around the world? Is it pandemic? Is it worse in certain cultures?
Unfortunately, it happens everywhere. It cuts across economic differences. It's not like only the poor people experience it or only the middle class. It goes all throughout. You hear stories sometimes in the newspaper of a very wealthy person who abused or hurt or even killed their spouse. So it happens across culture, across education levels, in every culture in the world. The difference is that there are some countries that have more strict laws to try to prevent it or protect the victims, whereas in other countries it's just kind of part of the culture, and so it happens. Talking to somebody from another country, I remember them saying, we would love to be able to call the police, but if I do that, so-and-so's relatives are going to kill me. It's part of the culture. It's accepted there. Or the police will totally ignore that, even though the law may say this is what the victim is protected for by, the police will ignore it.
Now, our primary audience on Ministry in Motion would be pastors, religious leaders, lay leaders of congregations.
Right.
We're going to be talking about how they can help people in their community. Is this a problem in the families of leaders? In other words, could it be that there are some watching the program today who are saying, that's my life, that's my family?
I would say absolutely. And like Claudio just explained, it cuts across all boundaries, cultural boundaries, economic boundaries, spiritual boundaries. And many times we sit beside people in the same pews week after week and not realize what's really going on at their homes or behind closed doors.
If you want to find out what happens in the home, she as a teacher would know because kids come to school to tell them. And one of them was the story of a pastor's son who said to my wife as a teacher, oh, my dad hits my mom on the way to church and tell her, you better behave. So it happens even in pastoral homes in some situations. They don't know how to deal with their stress, or maybe they have had abuse in their own family and their upbringing, and they are continuing to do the same with their current family.
Now, after the break, we're going to talk about the cycle of abuse. But before the break, what are some warning signs that you might say, something's not right here? What are some red flags that might alert someone to the fact that there's some domestic abuse happening?
Well, one of the red flags that we look for is a controlling personality. In other words, one person really controls the other to the standpoint, not only controlling their finances, but controlling who you talk to. You can't talk, in many cases, to members of your own family or certain friends. In other words, I'm just going to isolate you. This very controlling personality, that's definitely a warning sign.
All right.
Trying to isolate the other person. You know, they don't want them to work. They don't want them to talk to their friends or their family because they don't want anyone else to know what's happening here. But by isolating them, they are actually keeping their support system away from them. It's a form of control.
Any other warning signs besides isolating or controlling?
Well, just wanting to get permission. You have to get permission for everyday decisions. There's some people, even the way they dress, where they go. I have to get permission who I talk to on the cell phone. Those types of things where all freedom of choice is taken away.
Calls you names. You're stupid, you're dumb, you're worthless. You're lucky that I found you, that I rescued you, that I married you. Or scaring you, driving in a very erratic, crazy way sometimes as a form to scare the other person.
Well, after the break, we're going to talk about the cycle of abuse. And lest you get depressed and say, I'm sorry I tuned into Ministry in Motion today, we're also going to talk about how to break the cycle. How you can find hope and how you can give hope as a leader in your community to those who may be caught in a cycle of domestic abuse. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with more Ministry in Motion. Welcome back to Ministry in Motion. Our topic today, domestic abuse. And our guests, Claudio and Pamela Consuegra, thank you so much for being here. We talked about the reality of the problem. And Pamela, in this section, walk us through this cycle that you talk about, a cycle of abuse. We're going to discover how, with intervention, that cycle can be broken. What does that cycle look like?
Well, I think it's very helpful for individuals to understand it is indeed a cycle, and a cycle that needs intervention, a cycle that we need to interrupt. And sometimes just helping victims understand the cycle, then they can say, that describes me, that describes my life. I understand now. And understanding it will also help you understand why it's so hard to break. And so what we want you to imagine is the face of a clock. So as we talk about this cycle, we're going to talk about these different phases that occur, just like we would a face of a clock.
So like 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock,
Yes.
6 o'clock?
Yes.
All right.
So we want you to start with 3 o'clock on the face of a clock.
And the 3 o'clock is what is called the false honeymoon phase. It's what happened right after the abuse has taken place. And so what happened, and we're going to use the stereotype of a husband abusing a wife or a man abusing a woman. So now he wants to make sure she doesn't leave, so he treats her like a queen, brings her flowers, apologizes profusely. He's so sorry that this happened, brings her chocolates, takes her out to eat, brings out the family picture to show her what a beautiful family we've had. Look at these beautiful vacations. He wants to earn her love and her trust again.
Could
He's
he act
very
like
sorry.
that also during the courtship? In other words, before any abuse has taken place, there's this kind of false persona?
Well, yes, and that's true. That in the dating period, in fact, there's the first year of dating is called the Halloween period because we still wear masks, emotional masks. But in this case, in the case of abuse, because the abuse has just taken place, he's afraid that she may leave him, so he wants to reconquer her, so to speak. That's why he wants to treat her like she's never been treated before, and that's why it's called the false honeymoon period.
Okay.
Because it feels like a honeymoon. It's wonderful, but it doesn't last. It's only for a moment.
So 3 o'clock passes. Pamela, where do we come to next?
3 o'clock passes and we come to the 6 o'clock hour. And at the 6 o'clock hour is what we call the normal phase. We settle down into normal life like most of the people around us. You know, I'm not getting the chocolates every day anymore. I'm not getting flowers. I'm not getting all the little romances that he did before. But life is good. Life is good. It's still the way I imagined it to be. So we just go throughout day to day. No blow-ups, no wonderful gifts either, but it's normal.
Now, I'm guessing if a person is in a domestic abuse situation, he or she is sitting on the edge of the chair wondering what's going to happen at 9 o'clock. Because if we've been there before, maybe even if we've never talked about it, we sense that we're not going in a straight line, but we're actually circling around. So what happens when we pass through that normal to 9 o'clock? What happens then?
Right, you described it as sitting at the edge of your seat. It's called, the 9 o'clock is called the attention rising stage. You know something is about to happen. You don't know when, you don't know where. It's not something that you say. It could be something you don't say. You're walking on eggshells. You can sense the tension. Something is about to happen. And one of the interesting things that happened during that time is that the victim now says, if I'm in the kitchen, my abuser will take whatever to hurt me. So if I'm in the kitchen, it could be a knife or it could be something hard. So maybe I'll try to stay, say, in the living room, because if he's going to throw something at me, maybe it's a pillow that's softer. So she begins to say, let me find the way to protect myself, even though I know it's going to happen, but at least protect myself from the worst hurt or damage. And that's why that tension rising is very unsettling in more ways than one.
Now, let's reverse the gender, because you said it could work both ways. I could imagine a man in that situation, if he has a busy job, staying longer at work or just having excuses when actually what he's trying to do is avoid what happens at 12 o'clock.
Right.
That's right.
Review 3, 6, and 9 for us again. 3 is
Well, 3 o'clock, false honeymoon
false honeymoon,
stages.
things are sweet.
Life is good. We're in this wonderful honeymoon stage.
Right.
That's why it's called honeymoon.
6 o'clock?
6 o'clock, normal. Life is still good, but it's normalized. 9 o'clock,
9 o'clock?
tensions are rising. The rising tension.
Walking on thin ice.
Walking on thin ice, walking on eggshells. I know it's about to happen. I can sense a change in the air. Emotions are not like they were. They're unstable. And then
12
all of a
o'clock?
sudden, 12 o'clock happens.
It's the actual explosion, and it happens again. And some of the sad things is that the cycle is repeated. Some couples will go through that cycle once a year, but some couples, because the cycle actually accelerates, some couples will go through it twice a year, 3 times a year, 5, 6 times a year. Some couples report going through the whole cycle 5 to 10 times a day. In and out, in and out.
That would be kind of a terrorizing experience, wouldn't it?
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely, which is what keeps the victim in there, always with the hope that, oh, we're back in the honeymoon, things have changed. This is the time, going back to normal, tension rising, it happens again, I'm going to leave. No, wait a minute, he's apologizing again, things will be fine. And also that controlling attitude. I had someone who said to me, my husband puts the gun to my head and says, go ahead, call the police before they leave the station, I will kill you. So it's that fear, I can't leave, I can't go do anything outside of the home because I don't have a job, I don't have money. They stay in the relationship because they feel hopeless, but there is hope. You can get out of that situation, and obviously that's what we're going to talk about later.
And I'm so thankful that we have another segment to our program today, because we do want to talk about how, with help, you can break out of that cycle of domestic abuse, whether it's spousal abuse, child abuse, elder abuse, that we're going to learn some strategies that can really help, whether that's in your own life, your own family, or whether as a leader in your community, you can extend hope to someone who's caught in this cycle, which appears to be endless, but it doesn't need to be. The cycle can be broken. So we hope you'll stay with us as we look at the important topic of domestic abuse with a word of hope right after our break. Ministry in Motion. Welcome back to Ministry in Motion. Our topic today, a challenging one, domestic abuse. It's good to have our co-hosts back, Anthony Kent.
Thanks, Derek.
And we've been interacting with Claudio and Pamela Consuegra. Thanks for being with us today. Yes. In your ministry as Family Ministries Director and Associate Director for the North American Division of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, you deal with this issue on a regular basis, both outside and even inside the church. Yes. But in this section, Pamela, we want to talk about a word of hope. We've talked about the reality of the problem, that cycle of abuse. Give us a word of hope. How can that cycle be broken?
Well, I want to say a word especially to the victims today, or someone who knows a victim. You feel hopeless. Where can I go? My life is such a mess. And I always think of a quote by Corrie ten Boom when she just felt she was at her lowest. And the quote in her book says, "There is no pit so deep, but that God's love is not deeper still." So no matter how deep your pain, no matter how deep your hurt that you have suffered as a result of domestic violence, God loves you, and God's love goes deeper than that pit that you feel in your heart.
And I know that God wants to deliver us from the pit, right?
Yes, He
does. And so talk to us about these steps, these 4 steps that can break that cycle that you talked about.
Well, and the first one might be the most difficult one, especially for a victim, and it's to call the authorities. I know you have to think, if they arrest him, who's going to support the family? What are the church members going to think? But without intervention, the cycle will go on without interruption, and in some cases, it will lead to the death of the victim. So by all means, protect yourself as a victim, protect yourself, protect your children by calling the authorities.
So you're going to call the police? You're going to find a hotline for abuse victims, Google that or find it somehow if you know the number. And that takes some courage, doesn't it, Pamela?
It takes a lot of courage.
And sometimes family or friends have to be the ones to intervene. They're aware, and they can be next to the victim as they make the phone call. As a pastor,
Support.
I took one of the members of my church to the police station to be with her, because to say to her, go to the police was one thing, but I had to say, I'll go with you. And there she filed a police report. She needed that support from the pastor, and so sometimes you may have to do that.
And police are becoming more and more skilled in managing this as well, you know, and intervening, aren't they?
They're getting more and more training. You know, a domestic violence call is one of the most dangerous police officers have to respond to. So usually they go by 2 or 3s to make sure they separate the parties. But then it's not enough to just say, we're going to arrest this person, but they offer lots of resources: women's shelters, counseling, social workers, social services, etc. So the police do have the resources and the information that the victim needs.
So that's the first step,
That's the
Pamela,
first.
is to call the police in whatever area you live. What's the second step to break this cycle?
Number 2, reach out to someone you can trust. Find someone, whether it's a relative or a trusted member in the church. Find someone that you can really trust. Let them know what's going on, because part of the issue or part of the healing begins with admitting it. And so just having someone that you admit it to, this is what's happening in my life, and this is what's going on in my home, can be a real positive step towards healing.
It seems that many people caught in that cycle of abuse, they're kind of the secret keepers.
Yes.
It's difficult to share.
Yes, yes, indeed. In addition to that, and this would be the third thing, talk to a professional, be it a pastor, be it a counselor, your doctor. Go to the hospital. They can do a report, but they also can give you the resources that you need. It's not something that we can handle by ourselves. We need outside help.
So let's, we've got 3 so far. First, call the police. And that sets a boundary of protection, too, for the individual,
Yes.
right?
Right.
Second, confide in someone you trust. And then you're going to bring in someone with some expertise
That's right.
Yes.
that can help you through this challenging time. What's step number 4?
Number 4 is make a safety plan. And sometimes this is hard for folks to realize, but especially if we have children, we need to realize that it's our responsibility to get our children out of that environment. So make a safety plan. And just having a plan, where are you going to go? How are you going to live? Because so many of these victims have been told over and over again, you can't leave me. You don't have the finances. Your home is here, so where are you going to live? And so just having a plan sometimes enables them to escape.
For instance, tell a friend of yours a word, sort of a key word that when you say it, they know that something is happening and you need help. The word rain or cold or elephant or whatever it may be, so that when you say it, they know they need to intervene. Set aside some money, because if the abuser is so controlling with money, what are you going to do to support yourself or to even get out of the place? And so you might be able to set aside some money. If you do open a bank account, make sure that the statements are not sent to the home. Maybe the funds should be with a trusted friend. Put a package together with all documents that are important: driver's licenses, insurance documents, birth certificates, marriage certificates, because if you have to leave in a hurry, you need to make sure you can grab those things, or that someone has them when you need them. So that's part of the escape plan, so to speak.
Would it be helpful we've got many leaders who watch the program, would it be helpful for the leader to share those 4 steps with the community? In other words, to inform the community, here are some things, if it's happening, call the police, confide in a friend, get some professional counseling help, and have a plan. I wonder how many leaders are actually doing that.
You know what I would do as a pastor is to educate my congregation. That's really where it should begin. I heard of a church that heard of a family or a woman that was being abused, and they embraced them. They took the family with the children and put them in a home of a member for 3 days. Then they moved them to another home, from home to home, over 3 days. The reason for that is to protect her from the husband who had threatened her. And secondly, she didn't have to go to a shelter. She was in the home of a church member. And I said, man, that's what I would love to see in a church, a community that embraces the victim. So it starts by educating them.
That's a beautiful plan. And to think of the church not as a place that will judge you because you've been in this cycle of abuse, but as a community that will love you, that will embrace you, that will help you in your healing. Thanks so much, Claudio and Pamela Consuegra, for joining us today. Anthony, it's been a challenging topic, hasn't it?
It has.
We'd like to invite you to go to our website. Perhaps you just joined us and you say, this is an important topic, domestic abuse. Go to our website at ministryinmotion.tv. Watch the whole program. You'll find other resources there that will help you to be the leader God is calling you to be. And if on the program today you've sensed the needs for some healing in your own life, and thank God that there's no pit so deep that God's love cannot reach you. Thanks for joining us for Ministry in Motion today. We'll be praying that God will bless you in your ministry for Him.